Chapter 5 of The Inner Chamber and the Inner Life by Andrew Murray. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Christopher Smith. Moses, the man of prayer. Before Moses was the patriarchal dispensation, with the family life and the power the fathers had marking it. Moses is the first man appointed to be a teacher and leader of men. In him we find wonderful illustrations of the place and power of intercession in the servant of God. Moses' prayers. In Egypt, from his first call, Moses prayed. He asked God what he was to say to the people, Exodus chapter 3 verses 11 to 13. He told him all his weakness and besought him to be relieved of his mission, chapter 4 verses 1 to 13. When the people reproached him that their burdens were increased, he went and told God, chapter 5, verse 22, and he made known to him all his fears, chapter 6, verse 12. This was his first training. Out of this was born his power in prayer when, time after time, Pharaoh asked him to entreat the Lord for him, and deliverance came at Moses' request. Exodus chapter 8, verses 8, 9, 12, 28, 29, 30 and 31, chapter 9 verses 28, 29 and 33, chapter 10 verses 17 and 18. Study these passages until you come under the full impression of how real a factor in Moses' work and God's redemption prayer was. At the Red Sea, Moses cried to God with the people, and the answer came. Chapter 14 verse 15. In the wilderness, when the people thirsted, and when Amalek attacked them, it was also prayer that brought deliverance. Chapter 17, verses 4 and 11. At Sinai, when Israel had made the golden calf, it was prayer that at once averted the threatened destruction. Chapter 32, verses 11 and 14. It was renewed prayer that gained them restoration. Chapter 32, verse 31. It was more prayer that secured God's presence to go with them, chapter 33, verse 17. And once again, it was prayer that brought the revelation of God's glory, chapter 33, verse 19. And when that had been given, it was fresh prayer that received the renewal of the covenant, chapter 34, verses 9 and 10. In Deuteronomy, we have a wonderful summary of all this. Chapter 9, verses 18, 19, 20 and 26. We see with what intensity he prayed, and how in one case it was for 40 days and 40 nights that he fell on his face before the Lord. Chapter 9, verse 25, chapter 10, verse 10. In Numbers, we read of Moses' prayer quenching the fire of the Lord, chapter 11, verse 12, and obtaining the supply of meat, chapter 11, verses 2 and 11. Of prayer healing Miriam, chapter 12, verse 13. Of prayer again saving the nation when they had refused to go up to the land, chapter 14, verses 17 to 20. Prayer brought down judgment on Korah, chapter 16, verse 15. And when God would consume the whole congregation, prayer made atonement, verse 46. Prayer brought water out of the rock, chapter 20, verse 6, and in answer to prayer the brazen serpent was given, chapter 21, verse 7. To prayer God's will was made known in a case of difficulty, chapter 27, verse 5, and Joshua given as Moses' successor, verse 16. Study all this until your whole heart is filled with the thought of the part prayer must play, may play, in the life of a man who would be God's servant to his fellow men. As we study, the parts will unite into a living whole, and Moses will be to us a living model for our prayer life. We shall learn what is needed to be an intercessor. The lessons that will come to us will be such as these. I see Moses was a man given up to God, zealous, yea, jealous for God, for his honour and will. A man, too, absolutely given up to his people, ready to sacrifice himself if they may be saved. A man conscious of a divine calling to act as mediator, to be the link, the channel of communication and of blessing between a God in heaven and men on earth. A life so entirely possessed by this mediatorial consciousness that nothing can be more simple and natural than to expect that God will hear. I see here God in answer to the prayers of one man saves and blesses those he has entrusted to him, and does what he would not do without it. I see how the whole government of God has taken up prayer into its plan as one of its constituent parts. I see how heaven is filled with the life and power and blessing earth needs, and how the prayer of earth is the power to bring that blessing down. I see above all how prayer is an index of the spiritual life, and how its power depends upon my relation to God and the consciousness of being His representative. He entrusts His work to me, and the more simple and entire my devotion to His interests are, the more natural and certain becomes the assurance that He hears me. Think of the place God had in Moses' life, as the God who had sent him, the God to whom he was wholly devoted, the God who had promised to be with him, and who would and did always help him when and as he prayed. Now for the practical application. How to learn to pray like Moses. We cannot secure this grace by an act of the will. Our first lesson must be the sense of impotence. Then grace will work it in us, slowly and surely, if we give ourselves into its training. But though the training will be gradual, there is one thing that can be done at once. We can at once decide to give ourselves to this life and take up the right position. Do this now. Take the decision to live entirely to be a channel for God's blessing to flow through you to the world. Take the step. If need be, take 10 minutes for deliberate thought. Accept the divine appointment and take up some object of intercession. Take time, say a week, and get firm hold of the elementary truths Moses' example teaches. As a music teacher insists upon practicing the scales, only practice makes perfect, set yourself to learn thoroughly and to apply the needed first lessons. God seeks men through whom He can bless the world. Say definitely, "Here am I will give my life to this." Cultivate large faith in the simple truth, God hears prayer, God will do what I ask. Give yourself as wholly to men as to God, and set your eyes open to a sense of the need of a perishing world. Take up your position in Christ and in the power which His name and life and Spirit give you, and go on practicing definite intercession. End of chapter 5.